Ladies, hey, congratulations on your documentary, Surviving Sex Trafficking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, is this a sort of a direct correlation with your previous documentary, sort of like a follow-up, or it's entirely separate?
It's entirely separate. Stopping Traffic it's more focused on the educational statistics side, and Surviving Sex Trafficking is story driven. So in the beginning, we thought it was going to be a follow-up, and we titled it Stopping Traffic 2, but then it became its own story.
I was going to say that Surviving Sex Trafficking, this is a very, very hard story to tell. So how did you want to approach, telling this documentary, especially since you also have personal stakes into this?
Well, we know that survivors have gone through so much, and the intention behind the film was to touch on pain. So how do we bring pain up? Pain is universal, and everybody has a form of pain. They've gone through their own trauma. They have their own suffering. They've gone through certain experiences. So we wanted to focus on pain and help people release their pain through the film. And that's why we wanted to focus on the strength, the resilience, and still following the survivors through the challenges, but ending on hope, because hope, we have to bring hope to this dark subjects. Sex trafficking is a very, very dark world. And some people don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to listen. They don't want to hear about it. So we had to bring up sex trafficking in a way that honors the reality, but it's also palatable.
This is a subject that a lot of people talk about, but most people don't register. I mean, how do we try to educate people more about a subject like this? Because it seems like it occurs everywhere and anywhere, but it's either people are not aware or people are just ignoring it.
There are, I think right now there is a lot more awareness about what human trafficking is and sex trafficking. There is so many people trying to put effort towards this movement. And so a lot of people are finding out through community events, through nonprofits, many ways on social media. But our way was to create a film, because we believe that a film has the power to really influence people, but also inspire them to take action. So that was the medium that we chose to raise awareness with.
Now, unlike most documentaries, most documentaries like to be the fly on the wall, just to observe people's actions. But you are more proactive in this documentary on this approach. Is it because of the subject matter, relatability, and that you want to help out these women that you have to be more proactive rather than just a standard? Let's just watch what happens?
Initially, we really didn't know how the story was going to pan out, because we went into the film just wanting to follow the survivors and their journey. And then after filming and then going through the editing process, we realized, well, where's the thread? How can we connect these stories in a powerful way, have the arc, have all of those components? And so I realized, after writing and just kind of wondering well, what is the missing piece? I realized maybe I have to put myself in there. So we went into the film not knowing that. We wanted to focus on the survivors, but I ended up having to be in there to be that kind of fourth dimension, that gentle thread that allows the viewers to connect to the survivors. Of course, it's all about the survivors, but it makes them more relatable.
Now, at the start of your production, you reached out, in a way to trying to get these subjects. You did actually get a few for this film. Were there much more number of subjects that were possibilities for your documentaries, and it was just circumstances you couldn't convince them to participate?
So we actually didn't have to convince anybody to be a part of the documentary. It's interesting because people wonder, and they've asked us before, did you have to do a lot to, get them to share their story, or what did you have to do? So it just happened that, a few of them reached out to us through social media when we posted it online, and they said, I want to share my story. I'm ready to tell the world what happened to me because I don't want this to happen to anyone else. And then the other survivors, we did a trip where we traveled the world. We visited a few countries with a really amazing organization called Children at Risk. And we took a group of activists, and one survivor came with us on that trip. And that is Rachel, who's also in the film. We also didn't know she was going to be a part of it, but we had so much footage when we went around the world with her. And at the end, we're like, she needs to be part of the film too. And then while we were traveling, we visited shelters, we met with activists, we met more survivors, and the stories just unfolded. We found two more survivors, one from Ethiopia and one from India, who you will also meet in the film. And again, survivors everywhere around the world are ready to share their story because their pain is so deep, what they've gone through, they don't want this to happen to anyone else. And so a lot of them are ready to share their stories. So we decided that we would have 5 survivors maximum in the film, and that's how we found them.
So it's, as you make this into like an international film, is sex trafficking all the same throughout the entire world, or maybe it's possibly different in through approaches in culture?
Sex trafficking is different in the sense that why it happens in each country, the way it happens, like in the Philippines, you have your traffickers there, or you have your red light districts. The women are there by force, and by force, could it mean because they have no food, or is it because someone has forced them, or they've been kidnapped to work on the streets? So sex trafficking is different around the world, how the shelters deal with it, how it happens. And so that's why it's so important to highlight what it looks like around the world, and also the differences compared to the United States. When we were in the Philippines and Rachel shared her story to the girls that were there, they're like, that happens in the United States. So they couldn't even fathom that it would happen, in the United States, only in maybe their country or similar types of countries.
I would say, if you don't mind me sharing this, that even within the United States, every trafficking case it's almost different. And we were just in a room the other day with quite a few survivors, and just to kind of like share a few things about each one. One had been sold by her own mother when she was 12. One had been brought from Costa Rica under false promises to work as a nanny. She ended up being trafficked. Another one was born into that kind of environment. Another one was groomed into it. So you can see that almost every single case is different. And that's what makes sex trafficking and human trafficking very complex and almost difficult to really understand.
So during this entire process of the documentary, it's almost like a self-discovery to discover that each woman came into the situation differently. But it's also the self-discovery that each woman would have to resolve it differently too, right?
Right. Each of them are very different. Their stories are different. Their mental, emotional states are different. And even the way they heal is going to be different. So that's why it's so important to kind of follow each of the survivors to see, how their story unfolds. Where are they at, and how are they processing? So, people will see in the film, Kendra is very different in her approach. She goes through martial arts and self-defense, versus Angie, who's focusing on her baby and her mental health in a different way. So it's very different. And I think that part is also universal, because everybody is different in the way they process their pain, their trauma, their suffering. And we have to respect that and see what works best for each individual.
Is the issue right now to help out these survivors just in the institution? It's just we try to put one size fit all. Maybe there's a systemic issue involved trying to help these survivors?
I wish we could say that we had some kind of system for it, but unfortunately, we don't even have enough resources, enough shelters to really help survivors. And that is kind of like the goal with the film, is to actually inspire people to open up more shelters, to open up more programs. There are programs out there, but some people can only, like the nonprofits can only provide resources for 30 days, but we already know 30 days is not enough. Some other shelters offer 1 year, 2 years, and that helps tremendously. But now we know that their healing is not a 1 year program. It can also be a lifelong program. So we need more resources. We need more people to really step up and create more resources for them.
When you sit down with the interview subjects, how do you approach asking these hard questions delicately with them?
We have to approach it very delicately. We spoke with them on the phone. Angie actually came out to our ashram. We're about an hour away from where she was. And so we got to connect with her in a very personal way and kind of feel her out. And we wanted to show her like who we are. We're Jain monks. Our intention is pure. We want to help. We want to, use our film and the platform to get her voice heard. And so that's the thing with the survivors. Once they trust someone and they can see the pure intention, at least with us, they become an open box. And through that, the trust is built. And we remind them there's no judgment. We're here to listen. If there's something you don't want to say, you don't have to say it. So they totally lead the conversation. And with Angie, even in her first interview, she's like, well, I don't want to touch on that subject right now. And we're like, okay, we'll revisit it later if you want to at that time. So it's definitely about respect and trust in handling such a sensitive part of their life.
So at which point, during this production process that you decided to input your own story also, your own point of view into this film?
It was at the very end. It was during the editing process when we were trying to figure out what is the best storyline to honor the survivor stories. But that missing piece it wasn't there. It wasn't there. And so that realization happened and it was just like, what is it? What is it? And having that moment and realization and meditating on it, like, okay, I have to be there. I have to be there because without that extra dimension, because we wanted to get into the pain, but we also wanted to focus on compassion. We wanted to identify how hard it is to heal from pain for anybody and them. So by putting myself there and sharing, part of my journey and what I've gone through, again, it makes it more relatable.
When you came upon that decision, was it also a fairly difficult battle yourself?
It was a moment. I cried. I was like, wow, I'm going to have to put my story out there in a very, very detailed way. But again, it's like I was willing to be uncomfortable for the sake of sharing their stories. And even when I watch the film now during the screenings, I cringe because it's just so hard. But it's like, I'm willing to go there because that is much more important.
So in a film like this, who should they actually be watching this type of film? General audiences or survivors?
Both. I think this film is for both survivors as well as general audiences, because one of the main objectives is to also prevent sex trafficking. And nowadays, it's not something that we can say that, this only happens to a few people, this only happens far away from where I live. It is a reality that, it's hitting very close to your own home with the internet, that with the access to internet, so many traffickers are trying to get to children, and very easily through the game apps, through the social apps, they have access to your children. So people have to be educated to prevent sex trafficking, but also survivors to watch it, because another thing is, And this just happened the other day. One of the survivors who watched the film was telling other survivors about the film. And the survivors were so like impressed, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that survivors can share their stories like that at that level. And they were like, I hope one day I can be like that. I can share my story. So it's going to help so many people in so many ways, both general audiences as well as survivors, and even just normal people who have experienced sexual abuse or trauma of any way. It's going to help them release that pain. So it's for everybody to watch.
The statistics that you revealed, the 99% versus the 1%, that's actually a scary statistic. I mean, it seems like this is a very much uphill battle. Could there even be an end game for something like this?
People have to change. People have to change. If there's a demand for it, there's going to be a supply for it. And that's the scary part. We'd love to change those numbers. I mean, there's, maybe close to 45 million trafficking victims worldwide. And a statistic is a statistic, right? It's so hard to count, but based on feedback from the countries and all the data collected, that's what they're saying. That's a huge number. And that's like a pandemic in itself. And why aren't we paying attention to it? That many people affected. So that's why it's so important to raise awareness about sex trafficking. And the more we raise awareness, the more, people become aware. So they're going to be more cautious. They're going to be more protective. They're going to inquire with their kids, like, well, what's going on? Who are you talking to? Or friends when they find out. And maybe because friends talk to each other, the teenagers, they talk amongst each other. And maybe the friends will start to speak out for the other person. So that's why education is so important about this topic.
So then for the both of you, what's next after this? Because now you have two documentaries under sex trafficking. Do you want to continue with this subject or approach other issues that affects the world?
That's a great question. So there are different things. So in terms of fighting sex trafficking, we will continue to always fight it. As a result of the first film, we established our very first nonprofit called Stopping Traffic. And now through the nonprofit, we are directly helping survivors by giving them scholarships to pursue education. We are giving them help for treatment, for medical treatment, for dental treatment. We are giving them healing workshops. We are directly helping shelters by providing some resources for them. So that will never stop. That will continue. That's part of now our lifetime work, in that sense. In terms of filmmaking, yes, we will continue to make films. We are definitely going to be exploring other topics that are in alignment with what we believe in, and that is always the principle of nonviolence. That's the foundation of Jainism, the foundation of us being Jain monks. And so we will definitely cover other topics related to this. We want peace for people. We want living beings to be fully free of pain and suffering. We want to help in any way that we can for people to experience freedom or liberation from all these terrible things. So absolutely, we will continue that work.
You're doing great work. And let me leave with one more thought. As audiences watch this documentary, Surviving Sex Trafficking, what is the one most important take that you hope that they walk away with?
We hope that they realize that they can make a difference. I feel that with sex trafficking, it's so huge and people can sometimes feel like helping them is so far away. But really by them already watching the film, 100% of the proceeds are going to directly help survivors and shelters. So they are already making a difference. So main thing is to care. Main thing is to care. And if they're inspired, volunteer at a local organization or support them. If they have resources, great. They can donate their time and their talents. There's so many ways to get involved. But even if that's not possible, by watching the film, they've already made a difference.
Excellent said. Well, thank you very much for talking to us about the documentary Surviving Sex Trafficking. I hope you continue this journey and the work the good work that you're doing.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much. You had great questions. Thank you.